Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. We are talking today about how to position your CV when you are applying for more senior roles. And we know that this is something that people struggle with. We see it within the career club. We see it when we're recruiting for senior roles, that sometimes a CV might be fine, but it doesn't really pop. So Pam, this is something that comes up a lot, isn't it, when you're reviewing client CVs and helping people to really stand out as a candidate?
Yeah, it is. And sometimes there's just some really small tweaks that you can make to really make your CV pop and really give it that authority that's needed for organizations or hiring managers to know that you'd be right for them. So I think that when we were going through, we found it really difficult, didn't we, to pull out what are the key things, because we could literally, as we discovered, talk for ages about what should be on a CV, what it should look like, and how you can come across in the best possible way on that CV. So we said we were going to go with 5, but I think we ended on 6, didn't we? So we've got 6 key questions or points that you should consider before you submit that CV for a senior role.
Yeah, it was really difficult. And we reflected on, when we're recruiting for senior roles, what are the things that really do make it pop? And we've framed these as questions that you can just ask yourself, almost that self CV review when you've completing applications. So let's move on to them then. So what's the first question someone should ask themselves about their CV?
So the first thing is going to be, is it the right length? And that is super important, because all we hear and see is industry standard. Your CV should be 2 pages. Who decided that? There is no industry standard. Probably somebody who was selling CV writing services came up with that as a way of marketing their services, but there isn't an industry standard. And yes, there is a cut-off point, because obviously nobody wants to read reams and reams of words on a page that some people will call their CVs. And we've seen some chunky ones. We regularly see chunky CVs. So asking yourself, is it the right length, is really going to help, because when you are asking that question, what you are actually asking yourself is, does it convey the right information? Does it tell my story? And in order to be able to tell your story and show your career journey, then it needs to be a certain length. Now, I always feel anything over 3 pages is going to be overkill, because even in a senior leadership role, you really only want to think about the last 10 years. So anything more than 3 pages is probably going to be too much. But at the same time, depending on that story that you need to convey, you might need an extra page. You might have a list of publications that you would also like that employer to see. You might have something else that you need to add in. So we are not here to say there is a one size fits all. And this is exactly what we teach around writing CVs. There is no one size fits all. Yes, we can give you what we know as a high performance CV template, but the information that goes into that is going to be unique to you. We can show you how to set it out and lay it out, but what goes into that is going to be absolutely unique.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? People either worry that 2 pages isn't enough and try and condense everything, and so the format sacrifices to try and fit something into 2 pages, or sometimes they go the other way. And we were talking about our personal bests. So we've had CVs that have been from 12 pages. The absolute record was 36. And yes, absolutely, that is War and Peace. It's a book and nobody is going to read all of that. But certainly 3 pages, maybe a 4th page, like you say, of publications, or if you've got a list of technical certifications that are required, then those can be included as a separate page. But realistically, the point you need to ask yourself is this the right length to keep that interest? Which kind of brings us on really to the second question, doesn't it?
Yes. So the second one, does this sound like a human or AI? And this is something that we are seeing a lot of. And now we are like the super AI spotters, aren't we? We can tell you in the first 3 seconds of reading your CV if it's been written by you or if it's been written by AI, because obviously we are seeing so many CVs as part of what we do. And we are also using AI to see how can people get the most out of AI. So we can really see the difference, and it's really easy for us to spot. What this means is that it's easy for employers and recruiters to spot too, because what you'll see when you see multiple CVs is that they all start to look and sound the same, which means that everybody then blends into one. And it's so difficult then to figure out who is going to be the best person for this role, who is going to come and make the most impact, because everyone looks the same. And if you think about it, not every recruiter or hiring manager has got the time to screen everybody and give them a call and find out, what do you really do? What is it that you really do? And I think that's the key, isn't it? It needs to sound like you, and it needs to show what you really do, what you've really done, what you've really delivered.
That's the thing. It's a marketing document that markets you. So it's got to be language that you would use. And I think it's interesting because probably certainly 18 months, 2 years ago, we wouldn't have had this question, because at that point, the use of things like ChatGPT was in its infancy. And it's as that has happened, senior level candidates are the type of people that will be using AI often within their everyday roles. They will be using the likes of ChatGPT for different things. And so it's natural to turn to that for this kind of task when it's an unfamiliar task of, I need to make my CV impressive, I need it to showcase. But what you have to remember is that those models do the same job and treat everybody's CV the same way. What we've also seen is things like with application questions, where it will frame it in a way of, you need to say this, and people will cut and paste the response. So it's talking even in the wrong person. So you've got to, if you are going to use AI, you've got to make sure that you then edit and make sure it really does feel true to you and language that you would use. Otherwise, even if you do get an interview, you show up and you sound very different to the person that's presented. So what's the third question then? This is one of my favorites.
Yeah, the third one actually fits in quite nicely after that, because the third question is about, is it written with the recruiter or the hiring manager in mind? Or is it written from the perspective of what I think I want them to know about me? So it's less about what they need and what they need to hear, and more about all of the things that you've ever done, every single thing. And what we find is that people will put everything and the kitchen sink on. And just as an example, a client that I was working with within the last couple of weeks, some of the things that they'd done early in their career, they built on those things. So not that they were now irrelevant, but they weren't the be all and end all of what they were trying to get across. And what happened was they ended up with, I think it was like 8 or 9 page long CV with absolutely everything that they'd done in their early career. Now that's great because we can see the progression and everything, but in the here and now as a senior leader, what we need to know is, what impact can you make? So if we're reviewing that, it's, what can this person bring? How can we see the value they will bring? And if you're writing it with the recruiter or the hiring manager in mind, then you're asking yourself that question, aren't you? What do they need to see from me? What do they need to almost hear from me. They need to be able to, you think when somebody reads your CV, they're just reading the words on the page, but actually, as they start reading those words, they start hearing the story, they start understanding the story, they start moving through your journey, what you can bring, what you've delivered, and they start thinking, this is similar to what we do, this is what we actually need to do, so this person would be really useful. And they start to put those things together in their minds and almost start taking off that mental checklist. And sometimes they will have an actual checklist, but for senior roles, it's usually more of a mental checklist where they're thinking, we know what we need to deliver, and is this person like touching on the right things? Is this person pressing the right buttons? Could we see this person in our organization delivering these things? And this is before they've even met you. And this is why the CV is super important, because if it's written with the recruiter or the hiring manager in mind, you are going to write it in a different way than if you are just writing it because you are like, I have worked bloody hard in my career and you need to know everything that I have done since I started from day one in my career. You need to know everything. And yeah, all of that stuff in the early days has got you to where you are now, but you've massively built on that. And it's usually the last 3 to 5 years that's going to be the most important, because that's probably where you've made the most impact, or where you're getting ready to transition into senior roles, or where you're getting ready to transition into maybe the C-level roles.
And I think that's often a hard question for people to answer, because they feel like they've written it with the recruiter or hiring manager in mind. But often that's the feedback we give when we review CVs is, no, this is not what the recruiter or hiring manager needs to know. You feel like you've done it with the intent of getting across the message of what they need to hear, but it's coming from you. And I remember when we were running an outplacement workshop not so long ago, somebody saying, I want them to know that I can do all these additional things. And my feedback to that was, okay, but as the hiring manager, I don't care what else you can do. I care if you can do my job. And that, I was a little less blunt, but still quite straightforward. But that, I think, is really key, that question. And that can be really hard for you to have that objective view when you review it. So what's the next one then?
So the next one is going to be, does it tell a cohesive career story? Leading on from who it's written for, does it tell them that story? Does it show what you've done, what you've delivered? Does it show your journey? And how clear does it tell your story? And I think that is super important, because sometimes what you'll find is senior leaders will get rejected from recruitment processes because the hiring manager or the recruiter can't really see the progression. They don't understand the level that they're working at. They don't understand what they've delivered, because a lot of the time people will just copy tasks and job descriptions into their CV without actually going through and thinking, what did I actually deliver? What impact did it make? And why is it relevant to this organization? And I think when we do the workshop, that's the key thing. It's about how you position that and how you get your head around what they need to know and how they need to understand that and read that on the page.
And when we're talking about telling a cohesive career story, I think people often worry about having gaps or being able to explain why they've made certain decisions and overthink some of that. And it's probably less of a challenge than you might think to tell a cohesive story if you have got some of those things like gaps between jobs or time away or a sideways move or a move into a different function or industry for a while and then coming back. There's ways to solve all of that, but it's about packaging that in a way that somebody can get the feel from reading your CV as to why those things have brought you to the point that you are the right candidate. Okay, if you've ticked all those boxes then and you've got all of those things, what's the next one? This one, I think people might be surprised by.
Yeah, so this is where it gets a bit tricky. And the question that you're going to ask yourself is, does it focus on hitting the ground running or making a future impact? And This is the mic drop moment, isn't it? Because this is where you take your CV from being like that junior manager, middle manager, even just on the cusp of senior management, and you turn your CV into that top level senior leadership CV that is an absolute no-brainer. And that employer, that recruiter can see that you bring all of that strategic stuff, all of that good stuff that's going to make an impact and drive their business forward. And I think the key thing is being able to zoom out, isn't it, on that CV and say, what does this CV really focus on? And get someone else to read it. Sometimes when you get someone else to read it, they're going to go, oh, you're so good, you're so brilliant, you can see all of these things that you've done. But then you can say to them specifically, what do you think I do? What impact do you think I've had? What do you actually think that I've delivered? And then they go, oh, okay. And then when they start trying to pick out those things, that's where you then go, okay, I'm missing a few tricks here. Because if that person doesn't really know what I've done, what I've delivered, and I've missed some key bits out, or as they're talking, you can then go, oh, I've just remembered that I did this, or maybe that bit could be more in depth, or that could be slightly different to how it sounds. And doing that is really useful. And I think if you can look at your CV from that perspective, and you can show the future impact that you can bring, rather than just, I can come to your organization and I can hit the ground running and I can do all of these hands-on things in a senior leadership role. They want that strategic view, don't they? They want to see how you're going to come in, get hold of our organization and really make that impact.
It's an interesting question, this, I think, because most people would probably expect, if it focuses on hitting the ground running, that's what I do need to show. Isn't that getting it right if I've done that? And I think what we would say is it's right for a certain level, but if you are applying for a senior role, then it's not enough. It has to focus on how what you bring can make an impact. And that is quite a shift change from a mindset perspective in terms of how you approach your CV. So yeah, a really interesting one, I think, because people would often think it shows I can hit the ground running. It shows that I'm good enough. Why is that? Why am I not getting interviews? And for us, when we're reviewing people's applications and CVs, it's often the missing link. So what's our final one then?
So the final one, and I feel like we've got these in a really good order because they're all just flowing on one after the other. But the final one is, does your CV ooze authority? And this is one that we find, and also when we do the workshops and we can see people's faces, when we give examples and all that kind of stuff, this is the one where a lot of people will lack that authority. So they'll have all of the stuff that they've done and delivered, but it'll be written in a way that it really lacks that authority and it just doesn't pack a punch. And you want that employer to just read it and be going through every section on your CV going, yes. You want them going through from the top going, yes, who is this person? Let me read more. And with each section, you want to be hooking them in. And that's exactly what we are going to be talking about in the CV workshop, and showing you how you can take people through those sections and really hook them in and make sure that your CV packs that punch, that by the time they get to the end of the first page, you want them to be like, get this person in. Schedule that interview in the next 15 minutes because this is the person. And we do get a lot of feedback, don't we, that people submit their CVs and the hiring manager is pretty much straight on. They get a call because their CV was super easy to read, understand, interpret. And it really does make the difference. Obviously, there's no guarantee, and it depends how much time the employers and recruiters are putting into reading those. But if they read it, you want it to pack that punch.
It really does have to. And it's interesting as I was listening to you describe that, because I think one of the reasons people don't have a CV that oozes authority is because there's this sense of humility and modesty where people are not used to self-promotion. But your CV has got to be self-promoting. It has got to plant the flag of, I am there, I am at this level. You've got to leave no sense of doubt that you are at least worth having a conversation with. And I think what often holds people back is we hear it all the time. Shall I apply for this? Shan't I apply for this? There's that hesitation, that sense of, I'm not sure whether they will think that I'm good enough. And that doubt creeps in. And if that leaches out from the language that you've used or the way that you've presented yourself and your story in your CV, you are planting that seed of doubt in the mind of the person that is reviewing that CV. You've almost got to read that and think, yes, that is me on a Barocca day. That is me when I'm at my absolute best. And it's really got to do that selling job, because the job of your CV is not to get you the job, it's to get you the interview, it's to get you that conversation. And I think people just do themselves over by not wanting to sound too braggy or too boastful, but you absolutely have got to do that within your CV if you want to get those opportunities. So we recognize that these things can be a challenge, and we recognize that maybe you will be going through those and thinking, oh yeah, I'm pretty okay about the length and I think it does this, but maybe there's some of those questions where you're asking yourself and you're finding that challenge. So if you do want access to the training that we've provided to the workshop, then you can join the Catalyst Career Club. You'll find the link in the show notes, along with a code to get your first month for £1. And this is really a game changer. We have seen people make those sometimes quite small tweaks, like Pam was saying, and have an immediate impact. Literally yesterday, I had a message from someone who's done exactly this, and all of a sudden it's been offered 2 interviews. So if that's where you're at and you feel like your CV isn't doing you justice, then do come and join us. And if there is anything that you want us to cover as a topic in a future episode, then as ever, message and let us know. But for now, we will say goodbye. Thank you for listening, and we will be back with another episode next week. Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles, and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.